97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome in, everybody. Glad to be here. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. It's Sports Daily. It's a Tuesday. Chad Chambers producing, manning that IHOP hotline. 869-1240 is that number to call. Be sure you're with us throughout the program here today, listening in on KFH or for free on the Odyssey app, watching us on our video streams via Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch, as we will have lots of opportunities to win some really cool prizes. Thomas Rhett coming to Trust Bank Arena on Friday. You can get tickets to that. The Blue Beetle movie, the new one, the DC superhero movie, coming to Boulevard Theaters in Wichita. We can send you to an early showing, a sneak peek to that coming on Thursday. Also, some HTO, iced tea, and coffee to give away today, and some Wichita Wind Surge vouchers as that season comes down the home stretch. All of that and a variety of topics this morning. Tommy, how are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to hear that the generosity continues on the show this week. So many different giveaways. And so, I definitely think that it would be worth, if you want to win any of these prizes, you got to listen from start to finish, because we've got so many different things we're giving away that I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're extending this throughout the entire show.
It's going to be fun. It has been fun. A variety of topics coming up today as well. The AP polls out for the preseason in college football. That's always a good one. Some interesting things there that we'll get into. Conference realignment rumors that involve the AAC and Pac-12 coming from some obscure places, but some obscure places that have been sort of on this story. So we'll go through that and then explore a little bit what several people are writing about now, and that's how the CFP could change moving forward with all this shakeup. Maybe they all come, maybe all these things sort of tie in together. We'll get into that. We've got two of the old guys at the running back position signed sort of back-to-back yesterday as the AFC East adds up and bolsters up to its ranks a little bit. The Royals with an exciting night last night. Bobby Witt Jr., big play, a great pitching performance again from Brady Singer. So we'll talk a little baseball as well. Just as an aside, the Rangers went up another game over the Astros yesterday. I know everybody's just sitting on the pins and needles for that. Listen, if just give me your good vibes for my World Series bets on the Rangers, please. Like, as you're just watching baseball, maybe you're a Royals fan looking for something to root for that. For me, that's all. I mean, come on, we're giving away stuff every day. Can we just get that, please?
Can you imagine what this show is going to be like in October? If, let's just say, it's the Rangers and the Braves in the World Series,
I'm going to be a hot
my
mess.
team, like, it's going to be incredible to watch. And you're talking about the Rangers. The Braves took 3 of 4 from the Mets over the weekend. They crushed the Yankees last night, 11-3. So anytime that you can have a ton of success over the Mets and the Yankees, in my mind, that's a good time for you.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And we will love it and appreciate it and be awesome with it. And, maybe it'll happen. You never know. It'll be fun. All right, let's. You know what, Tommy? Let's mix it up a little bit. We haven't done this, Jad. Let's give something away right now for those of you that might catch the very early portions of the show that maybe don't get in on the giveaways each and every day. Let's do the Blue Beetle tickets right out of the gates here. So Blue Beetle's coming to Boulevard Theaters in Wichita. You can check it out a day early. Pair of tickets for a special screening. That'll be Thursday, 7 o'clock, so you can see it before anybody else. Boulevard Theaters out at Town West. Always appreciate them helping us help you. Second caller right now, 869-1240 to the IHOP hotline. We'll get that one done right out of the gates here today. I don't think we've done a first segment giveaway like that, so we'll mix it up a little bit. Good luck, everybody, and enjoy the movie on us. That IHOP hotline is the number to call, 869-1240. We'll hear a little bit from Chiefs camp, hear from Creed Humphrey, the man, the myth, the legend, talking to Mitch Holthus as a part of some exclusive audio coming to us with our partnership, or, of course, flagship stations, over on KNSS of Kansas City Chiefs football. So we'll get that coming in to Steve and Ted every morning They cut us a little audio from that. We'll have that later in the show too. Tommy, let's start with the college football. The AP polls out. No surprise. This one is probably a little easier to digest than the coaches poll. I feel for the coaches for even trying to do a coaches poll in college football with all you're tied into. But it's similar. You've got Texas out of the Big 12 at the top, followed by Kansas State at 11 and 16. Oklahoma's in at 20. And TCU, I skipped over them, is in at 17 and Oklahoma's in at 20. If you look at the future Big 12, Utah would be the highest ranked in at 14, ahead of Kansas State at 16. Georgia's the overwhelming favorite here. It does feel like Georgia is that kind of a favorite, although they don't have a quarterback. So we'll see. No surprises here for me, Tommy. Kansas got 10 votes. I'll talk about that in just a minute, but it's the first time since 2009 Kansas has had votes in this poll. What'd you think of the poll coming out yesterday, Tommy?
Not a lot of surprises. I mean, I think that we all could have picked Georgia as being the overwhelming favorite. I think in that, the couple teams that surprised me being where they are, LSU. I think, nationally the AP higher on LSU than they have been in the last couple of years. And so I was not really surprised, but it was intriguing to see them inside the top 5 at number 5 overall. And then from there, really, you've got Texas, you've got OU, you've got, these schools that are obviously leaving the Big 12 to go to the SEC next season, their swan song in the Big 12 this coming season. And, I think for OU, they had a disappointing into the year last year where they were out of the Big 12 championship race towards the end of the season. And they come in at number 20 overall, so they're not thought as a top 10 team or even a top 15 team nationally by the AP poll. And then, Texas is, up there at number 11. So, it makes me wonder if Texas is going to be able to then compete to play, in one of the playoffs, in the college football playoffs. So, overall, I look at those two teams as they're getting ready to leave the Big 12 after this season, kind of where they're going to end up.
Look, I don't have any issues with it. I think I do feel like Kansas State is not feeling the appropriate amount of love. I don't know if they should be in over Texas. I think I'm okay with it. And maybe ultimately Kansas State, if they end up, 15, 16, 17 at the end of the year, that's going to be great. So maybe they are feeling the right amount of love, but man, I just don't know. Imagine a scenario, Tommy, where a Power 5 conference champion returns a Heisman candidate quarterback in the entire offensive line. And I know Kansas State lost a bunch of dudes to the NFL. They returned their entire offensive line and a Heisman candidate quarterback. So that's where, to me, it's like, man, I don't know that enough people are paying attention to that aspect of K-State. But that's okay. Look, if they finish 16, we're all going to be pretty happy with that, right? Like if Kansas State ends this season and in the final AP preseason or the final AP top 25 poll, they're sitting there at 15, 16. I think we're gonna be in good shape there with Kansas State as far as this season being a successful one. And so maybe they are getting the appropriate amount of love. I don't know, but I do feel like there's room for them to sort of climb ahead of everybody's expectations.
Look, I think I get why they were placed kind of where they were. Because as you mentioned, they lost a lot of guys to the NFL. Obviously, Deuce Vaughn is gone. We talked about him yesterday. Felix Anudike-Uzomah, he was dominant. Is not there anymore with the Chiefs now. They lost, other players too. And I think that there had been a question even last season, and I think it extends somewhat into this season about exactly who the weapons are for Will Howard to catch the football from him. I think that was a question last year, and I think that does extend a little bit this year too. I don't know. I think that they were slotted appropriately. I don't have an issue with them at number 16, knowing who they lost, but then also knowing who they return. Honestly, I think that's kind of right in where I would have put them myself. Maybe a couple slots higher, like maybe they sneak inside the top 15, but I'm honestly okay with 16 overall.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I am too. I hope that they live up to the expect, and it really comes down to Texas. And look, everybody we've talked to is like, yeah, I get it with Texas. Most people put Texas up there, so it's fine. Let's talk about Kansas for just a second. So Kansas gets 10 votes. Now, I have tried, but the chatter around the office as people were looking through the votes, there was a voter somewhere on the East Coast, apparently, from the way I understand it, that put Kansas in somewhere in the high teens and not Kansas State. And so we were like, oh man, what are the chances somebody accidentally voted for Kansas instead of Kansas State? And that's how they got their 10 votes. I think that's possible.
I think that is what happened. Actually, I read that. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the voter was on Twitter and said that he put Kansas State, and then when it was being tabulated, whoever tabulated it put Kansas instead of Kansas
so that's
State.
where their points came from.
Yeah.
It's a nice feeling when you see that too, like, oh God, like they're getting votes. But at the same time, you see that as like, and I know they did in the coaches poll too. And honestly, the coaches poll, it makes a little bit more sense to me than the AP voting. Because I'm like, who's watching enough college football to vote on this that thinks right now Kansas is going to finish inside the top 25? And I love Jalen Daniels like everybody else does. And I think that their trajectory is for sure pointed up and everything's going great. But Tommy, like I've heard that one of the most popular bets right now is the under win total on Kansas. So like, this is going to be an interesting year. And I've been thinking a lot about this lately with Kansas football. Like what is good enough this year? Is 5-7, 6-6 good enough? Because that feels fairly realistic, and it would be good enough for me, I think. But after last year was so good, do they need to get to 7 wins for people to still keep the same amount of enthusiasm and momentum that they have right now on, August 15th? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm real curious to sort of gauge that this year because they do play a tough schedule. There is absolutely a world where they could finish under 500, I think. Or, Tommy, like last year, you can easily make the case too. Look, their defense is going to get better. They still have Jalen Daniels in there. We love their backfield. And, they are going to go out and win 7 games this year. So I think the possibility of outcomes is all over the map with Kansas. I just don't know, like, what is okay for fans? Like, what's that range right now?
I think that if they can get back to bowl eligible this season, I think you feel okay about their progress overall. Taking a look at their schedule, it is tough, right? It's a tough schedule. I think comparative to some other teams in the conference, as far as like the home and away splits and, who they face on the road versus who they face at home, it is difficult. And the back half of the schedule is, very difficult. And so I think that if they can get bowl eligible, again, 6-6, I think is kind of the baseline. And that's even kind of the line, overall in the betting market too. It's, their over under is right around 6. I think that that's okay. I honestly do. I think that we can all agree, and at least I believe this, that last season, the Jayhawks were ahead of schedule. Right. And so I think that I think it would be natural for, I don't want to say some regression, but to maybe come back down to earth a little bit. But as long as you're matching kind of where you were a year ago, I think you feel okay with that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And that's the thing too. Like, does matching where you were a year ago equate to wins directly? I don't know if we're to that point with KU yet. Maybe we are. Maybe we should be, where it is, very black and white business. Like, you got to win the games, or is it there's just, I still think there's some room for them to play a brand of football that we're excited about. The wins don't quite pile up yet, and we still feel good about things this year. Now, I'm not saying I think that's going to happen, because I don't. I'm probably a little bit higher on them than most people, because I think Jalen Daniels is that kind of player. I think Lance Leipold is that kind of coach that we can expect some things. I love their ability to run the ball, a 3-headed monster almost, right? When you incorporate Daniels into that. I don't know, I just don't know what kind of defense they're going to be able to play. But look, the Big 12, there's a lot of question marks all over the league this year. I know everybody's high on Oklahoma. They got a lot to prove, right? So We'll see. But it was interesting to see them get the votes and then have the balloon deflated that way, and that being what happened. That kind of sucks. But it's, nobody, Kansas, like, we love the trajectory of Kansas. You can't put them in the top 25 right now.
No. And they did find their way, as we all know, into the top 25 at one point last season when they were on that win streak to start the season, and College Game Day came to town. And, I think they snuck right into the top 20. They were like 19th or something at one point.
And they had to be at that point.
And they had to be. That was a fun, wave to ride. And then Jalen Daniels goes down with an injury. And then, things, kind of come back down to earth for the Jayhawks a little bit. But, I think that Daniels, if he's healthy, assuming that he is healthy coming into this season, I think that he can take you back to somewhere around where you were a year ago. But do we believe that this is a team that right now can compete at the top levels of the Big 12? Probably not. But I think that it's stair step, right? I think that it's growth year in and year out. And that's what Lance Leipold has preached, that it's not going to be a quick fix, that it's going to take some time to turn it around. And like I mentioned before, last season, I think everybody felt like they were ahead of schedule. I just don't want the expectation to be, if they match where they were a year ago, that you look at them as stagnant, because I don't think that that's true. I think that they were ahead of schedule last year, and now they're right back on schedule, to where they should be. Speaking of the Jayhawks, by the way, today's a big day for the football program at KU. They're unveiling their plans for, finally, it looks like, a brand new stadium to replace Memorial Stadium. They've been teasing it for quite a while. And today, I think, is the day that they reveal the renderings and the plans and the financing and all of that stuff that has been speculated on for a while. From what I've heard, it looks like they're wanting to completely redevelop the entire area around the football stadium, but all those plans should be revealed today.
That will be interesting and a little bit, contentious for some people around the state, but I'm excited to see it. Like, let's get a look at this thing and see the weight room. Sort of, if they can do that with a weight room, I want to do it with the stadium. It should be good. I think top half of the Big 12, by the way, for them this year is good. I think that's a good year for K-State. I think they need to be playing in that Big 12 championship game, Tommy. Like, I think the expectation's high. Whatever that is, however that gets there, whatever it looks like, I think a trip back to the Big 12 championship game needs to be our goal and our benchmark for K-State football this year. All right, let's take a quick break. That IHOP hotline's 869-1240. It is open. Bruce and Lyle. Jad was feeling generous, so he gave away a couple pairs of tickets to the Blue Beetle movie. Plenty more chances for you to win prizes today, including tickets to country music star Thomas Rhett's concert in Wichita on Friday. We'll do all of that when we come back. The latest in conference realignment. Interesting little nugget floated out there this morning. We'll look at that, and we'll look at some more, solid, I think, storylines as far as it relates to the CFP moving forward. But I think that could impact things a lot, too. We'll do it all. The Sports Daily rolls forward on this Tuesday with Albracht and Castor. Welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily on this Tuesday edition. Glad to be here with you. It is conference realignment season always now. So, Tommy, give us this obscure nugget we're hearing this morning, and let's explain that this is coming from, somebody that self-proclaimed not a member of the media, but has been on a lot of stories that have been kind of on here, and we'll dissect it a little bit. But it's MHVER3 on Twitter, but he's clearly got some knowledge on this stuff. So what's the latest from him this morning?
Yeah, I took everything that he said with a grain of salt for a while until I realized he's actually right on a lot of things and kind of predicted some things that had happened. And I don't know where his sources are. I'm not sure. I mean, he's not a member of the media, so I don't know exactly where he's getting this info. And honestly, we don't know who he is. But he reported 2 hours ago on Twitter, and I say reported, he tweeted 2 hours ago on Twitter that he is hearing that the Pac-12 has a commitment from 4 AAC schools, 4 American conference schools, to leave the conference and join theirs. He goes on to say that this could possibly create leverage to get the American to vote to dissolve their conference and get the majority of the schools to merge with the Pac-12. No idea. Not sure. I don't know. I don't know anything about it. It's just out there. It's floating around. Got a lot of traction this morning. And that's basically the gist of it.
So he's also reporting as a part of that. Earlier I guess it was last night, that ESPN's open to the idea of canceling that AAC deal. The Apple deal for a, Pac-4 AAC combination could be worth as much as $15 million a school. Tommy, what did I tell you last week?
Yeah.
What did I say?
You telegraphed that.
I like, to me, sometimes this stuff can be logical if you let it be. And like, my point last week that I'll make again and again, this guy's reporting this just different. And it's not reporting it, it's just conversation. Clearly, he's connected to enough people that are a part of these conversations that he's just sort of getting little nuggets. But again, if he's saying that league, whatever it looks like, could be worth as much as $15 million a year if the right schools were involved, the same money split out over more schools into more time zones, that if Apple was interested in a Pac-12 that didn't have USC and UCLA, that Apple should be interested in something like that, because if their goal is subscribers and you get enough of these schools with big enough profiles, that's going to drive subscribers. And we used Wichita State basketball as the example here. And I know this is a football conversation, but look, the bottom line is, if the Shockers start playing on Apple TV, a lot of people are going to subscribe to Apple TV that don't have Apple TV. I'll raise my hand. I would be one of them. Right? Like, I would absolutely do that because I need to watch Shocker basketball. So, like, it's always made sense to me. Like, okay, if Apple is willing to pay whatever in a footprint where, by the way, I'd be willing to guess that a lot of people already have Apple TV, right, out west, then why wouldn't they be willing to commit that same money to drive even more subscribers than they would have in the first place? Because for them, it's not necessarily about eyeballs. Now, they'll sell ads and they'll do that stuff, but if they can get subscribers, they win. And so it's interesting, and it has always made sense. And if you can get a merger of the best of those 3 leagues, I like it better than I like the old Pac-12 without USC and UCLA. So then you get to the point of this and the part of this where it's ESPN open to the idea of canceling the AAC contract. That's interesting. And I don't know if that tells us ESPN would like to just save the money, which could be true, right? In the current landscape, is there, boy, the dominoes on that. If ESPN's trying to do that, could they be making a bigger play, and could that have an impact on the AAC and the ACC and the deal out there? I think it could. I also think that you'd have to be careful here and read between the lines. Well, the AAC member schools, they're not going to let ESPN just cancel their deal, right? So that would tell you that they probably, for the majority, if not all, would be a part of that merger. And so if you look at other rumblings this morning from people, like there are people saying the AAC is not going to drop current schools. I mean, they just added schools. I don't think they're going to come in and drop people. But even the schools they added have decent footprints, and it would spread you out all across the country better. So Is it just a merger between what exists as the AAC now and the Pac-4? Does Oresco lead the charge on that, right? And does it just go back to being called the Pac-12, but it's Oresco in charge? Because I cannot imagine that anybody will let Kliavkoff be a part of any
No.
of this.
And in fact, one of the reporting from the same guy yesterday mentioned that the Pac-4 was meeting with Oresco and some of the American presidents to talk about merger options, and that Kliavkoff was not present and maybe done with his current job. So, I mean, I think that anybody who has followed what has happened over the last month or so, you'd be able to basically say, yeah, I don't think there's any way that Kliavkoff is going to keep his job as the commissioner of the Pac-12. The one point that I want to bring up here, and I want to pump the brakes a little bit on this, and I don't want to be a negative Nancy, but I'm going to do it. How much value, let's be honest, how much value from this perspective? I think we all know that there's value, but from a national perspective, with mergers and knowing that football drives the ship, how much value does Wichita State have in this merger? I mean, I think that more than likely they would just be along for the ride in this, because I don't think that there's going to be a scenario where, like you mentioned, the American starts dropping schools. But man, I think that knowing that football drives this conversation nationally, and it always has with realignment, I certainly don't want to see Wichita State be left in the dust. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think that that's a conversation that's probably worth having.
Look, Kevin Saul is he with us tomorrow? I think he is. I'm just going to check my calendar here. We are scheduled to have Saul tomorrow, so that's interesting. He is actually having a briefing today to go over last year. We're told to go over last year's athletic year and look ahead to this year's. I don't know what that means, but he's doing something today. And I'm not saying like there's going to be some like bombshell today. I don't think that that's true. But I do think Wichita State is in an interesting position. If this happened, I mean, Tommy, I don't even know that going with him would be the best option for Wichita State, by the way. I'm not sure that it would be. I don't know that. But that's where we start to wonder about things we've always wondered about, right? Like there are basketball-centric leagues in this country. Is Wichita State a better fit there? Now, you got to, I don't know what the dollars are at each of those places, right? Like I don't know what dollars are everywhere. But I do know that Wichita State's in an interesting position. Now, if they went out there, because probably what's going to happen, if something like this were to happen, they're also going to try to go to the Mountain West and include. And again, last week I said, like, why don't you just merge all three, right? That is an attractive option for Apple to merge all three of those. Go look at the footprints and the enrollment numbers and the, everything from the Mountain West schools. They're massive, massive. And that's subscribers, boom, for Apple right there, right? So if you got all three of those together and you had this, then I think you'd probably just want to be in that if you're Wichita State. And because the reality is Wichita State's deal right now, for the most part, Tommy, is just streaming centric, right? Every once in a while they get games on ESPN, ESPN2, whatever. But for the most part, most of the games now, we know this, we're used to watching them on ESPN Plus. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a bad option. And they wouldn't get $15 million a year because they don't have football. I don't know how that would get shared out. It would be, a portion of, just like it is now, whatever that portion is. But I do think it opens up some opportunities for Wichita State to test its value, right? Like, let's have conversations about what we could add value-wise to basketball brands. Number one place I'd call is Big 12. And I know that's a pipe dream, but I'd just say, hey guys, you know what we are. Like you're shooting for this basketball thing. You're talking to Gonzaga. You're talking to UConn. How about us? We'll take whatever. Give us, $2 million a year, whatever it is. That'd be the first place I call. Then I call the Big East because I think the Big East profiles very nicely. And I don't know the details of the A10, but that's another option. Or you just stay put if they want you. That's, that becomes a little bit frightening part of this. It's the if they want you part.
Right.
And I don't know that, but I would think that they would retain a place there. I mean, I'm seeing enough people say the AAC doesn't want to cast anybody aside in this, in whatever this might be. So again, we're exploring something that came from a place that's not a traditional place, but a place on social media where, this account has been pretty on a lot of this stuff. So I think it's our responsibility to pay attention to it. We'll ask the questions when we get the opportunity. And it's worth bringing up today. We're with Kevin Saul's availability, if he's hearing anything or what, and he probably can't answer that question. We'll obviously ask him about it tomorrow, and he probably can't answer that question then either, but we'll try. And it's really interesting. It's interesting across the board. It's not just for Wichita State. Like, this could be, if you got this, and honestly, Tommy, if you get this, I think that makes the ACC a little bit even more nervous, because you're running out of places to do anything.
Yeah, and that was kind of my next thought on this, is that, as the dominoes continue to fall, if this ends up happening, if you've got, the AAC and the Pac-12 and maybe even the Mountain West all coming together, where does that leave the ACC? And does that open the door and make it more likely that we see maybe a Big 12 ACC merger? I mean, if the ACC doesn't have other schools and other conferences that they feel like they want to poach, then at that point, maybe there's a phone call between the ACC and the Big 12 and say, hey, look, we share network partners in ESPN already. Why don't we go ahead and explore the idea of maybe merging our two conferences? And then I think you've got that merger, and all of a sudden that merged conference is even stronger in comparison to where the Big Ten and the SEC live.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best option, I think, for both leagues. I don't know what the money looks like, but if you can get ESPN back to the table, because the ESPN's already partners with both of those leagues and they just freed up some money out of the AAC deal, then yeah, I mean, I think, look, what is the best case scenario for college sports? To me, the best case scenario is a Big 12 ACC merger where everybody gets even more than they're getting now. Because basketball would be so good. And then you get this other merger of Pac-4, Mountain West, AAC. You've settled most of things, right? For teams that profile FCS, FBS, whatever you want to call it. You've settled most things in that scenario. You're back to 5. And here's the other part of it. And we'll talk about this on the other side of the break. I honestly, if you had that, you could probably still justify through the CFP a 5 and 7, which is what right now looks like might change to 12 at-larges, which would not be good, right, for anybody that's not in the current Big 12, Big 10, or SEC. Quite frankly, it wouldn't be good for anybody that's not in the Big 10 and the SEC. It wouldn't even be good for the Big 12. So that's the other part of this that may add some urgency, and we'll see. But all of this goes hand in hand. We'll talk about that CFP portion of it on the other side, and maybe even into hour number 2, because this is all fascinating. And again, like, as much as it is scary, it's logical. We literally laid out the scenario that's being rumored this morning last week. We did it. And I'm not talking to any of these people. I'm just looking at it and saying, okay, like, what could make sense here for all parties? Well, Apple wants in. If Apple wants in, let's let Apple help everybody and make something that makes more sense for them to drive subscribers. So here we go. Like, this is all crazy and interesting. And we've got, isn't today, by the way, side note, Florida State's deadline day?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's also floating out there and interesting. So I suppose we'll have to pay attention to that as well. On the way out, so we'll talk about the CFP part of this in just a minute. On the way out, let's give something away. Let's do our HTO. So we'll do, Jad, let's do tea and coffee today. So we've got the brew house at HTO where you can get, espresso drinks, hot, iced coffee, iced espresso, all kinds of stuff. We'll give away a free one of those. That one's good only at our East location over at 21st and 127th. And then we'll also give away a free iced tea, which is good both East and West. The West location at 13th and Tyler. We'll give those 2 away on our way out here. We'll come back. More Sports Daily, more realignment talk as we make our way through this Tuesday. Way to go, Randy, for winning some HTO coffee and tea. Available East and West, coming soon in Derby. Thanks, Randy, and enjoy it. Let us know what you think. All right, we've given away some Blue Beetle tickets as well, so that means in the next hour we'll do Thomas Rhett tickets and Wichita Wind Surge tickets. Stay tuned for your opportunity to win those. IHOP hotline 869-1240 is the place to do that. Of course, you can also watch us on our video stream, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch. Happy to have that. We are getting into the latest rumors of expansion. Certainly when the AAC is involved, it affects Wichita State. How it affects Wichita State is not as easy to understand and decipher, of course, because the Shockers don't play football. So we're watching that part of it very closely to know, like, okay, so what happens that one way or the other, Tommy? I don't think any of this settles without something significant happening with the Shockers. And what that is, I think, is, while we can look at some of this and I can say logically that, yes, Apple should have interest and could come up with similar dollars and all those things. What I don't logically quite understand is valuating a non-football school. So I really don't know. Like, I don't know what any of this means. I do know that if the part of it where it's like ESPN's willing to get rid of that deal and that's not good for Wichita State, because Wichita State doesn't play football. So I don't know. I don't know. Wichita State's probably very happy with its deal with, AAC right now and ESPN and all that. It's very complicated to understand. So we'll continue to watch it in that way. But when we talk about football, so right now the CFP, which starts next year, the formula is the 5 highest ranked conference champions, right? And 7 at-large schools. Now that was designed with the Power 5 model in place that would essentially guarantee, not all guarantee, but essentially guarantee the Power 5's champions in. Well, there's not really a Power 5 at the very current moment because the Pac-12's done. And so you have this scenario where you've got basically a Power 4 and Oresco is going to fight this out of the AAC, and I'm sure the Mountain West too. Like, this idea to just go to 12 at-larges, that only benefits the Big Ten and the SEC. I think the Big 12 should fight that too. at the current moment, and I think the ACC should fight it. And I think Jack Swarbrick, Notre Dame's AD, who's at that committee, should fight it as well. Unless, the only thing that would change that is if you get like a Big 12, Pac-12 merger. But I would much rather, instead of 12 at-large, just go to 4 and 8, right? Just shift it to say, okay, 4 highest-ranked conference champions. Because what I don't want to see happen is the Big 12 ever get squeezed out. And you can go back and look historically at how much the Big Ten and the SEC have dominated the playoff and all of these things. They're going to continue to do that. And I honestly don't care too much, Tommy, if it ends up being one Big 12 team and, 5 SECs and 5 Big Tens and 1 AC. Like, to me, that's still probably okay. But when you get 12 at-larges, I mean, we'd have to go back and look, but I'm sure there are years where the Big 12 or the ACC did not finish in the top 12 of voting. And that's not like, that wouldn't be good to me. That goes back to like what we don't want to see happen. And that's that you're not playing for the title. And I think you get like animosity that way. I don't think you get as much animosity, even if just one gets in, right? Just one. And it's going to be highest ranked, right? So it's not necessarily like K-State last year, same scenario. TCU was probably getting in over K-State anyway, even though K-State won that game because they had a higher ranking. Again, I'm fine with that too. Like, I'll deal with that. What I won't deal with is not having a place for a Big 12 champion and an ACC champion. That's what I can't see happen.
Yeah, I think that the proponents of this, like if you were talking to SEC or Big Ten people, I think that they would say, well, I mean, these other programs just, if they play better, they win more games, they'll have a seat at the table. Well, will they? Or will there be an argument about their level of competition? Will there be the right? I mean, there's going to be all of those different questions that come into it. And, I'm not advocating for any of these schools to get an unfair advantage. Like, I don't want the Big 12 or the ACC or whatever this new Pac-12 is going to look like. I don't want them to be propped up artificially to have a seat at the table, but I also don't want them to be squeezed out either. I don't want there to be a situation where we look at the 12-team CFP and it's 6 or 7 SEC schools and the remainder coming from the Big Ten. Like, that's not fun. Like, that's not fun overall. And that's not equitable either. And I think that one of the reasons why I'm skeptical that this will actually happen and why I am optimistic that there will be a new system in place, even if it goes to 4 and 8 or whatever that split is.
4 and
8
I'm
optimistic
not even getting
about
talked
that.
about. That's what worries me.
The reason that I'm optimistic ultimately about this is because it's not up to Greg Sankey. It's not up to the commissioners. It's up to the CFP committee. And these are people that, in theory, are objective outside of the actual like internal mechanisms of college football. Like, Condoleezza Rice was a member of the CFP committee, right? Like, so you would think, and maybe I'm putting too much faith into these people, but you would think that because they are not involved in the day-to-day, that maybe they can stay objective and they can understand the overall national perspective of making sure that, these other conferences have at least a seat at the table. But I don't know. I mean, again, maybe I'm giving them too much credit.
You are giving them too much credit. Greg Sankey can play good old boy all he wants and say, oh, I hate that this is happening, all he wants, but he's the reason it's happening. Let's not give too much credit. And he's doing his job. Like, I don't have a problem with him. But his answer has been, we were designed this so that we would have, a profile out west, and now that's already happening. That's not true. You design that so you have a profile in leagues, not in states. Like, nobody cares about that. Like, You need profiles in these leagues that play all year if you don't want the death of college football, as what it has always been. Let's continue this conversation when we come back on the other side, just digging into the potential ramifications of all this as it pertains to the CFP. And I'm so excited about the CFP, and I'm getting a little nervous that we might ruin why I'm so excited about a 12-team CFP. 869-1240 is the IHOP hotline. It's open. What do you think about all this? We'll give away some more prizes in the second hour as well. Check in on some big free agent signings, high profile at the running back position as well. Big hour number 2 coming up for you on Sports Daily on a Tuesday. Welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily, right here on KFH. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching on our video streams, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook. Always get in touch with the program. You can call into the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. You can leave us your comments. If you can't call in, right on that video stream, we'll see those comments no matter where you're watching it and wherever you post. We can see them on our end. So we'll get to some of that. Of course, you can find us on social media as well. All right. So we're talking conference realignment. Surprise, surprise. Things that make sense to us are making sense, it sounds like, based on conversations that are happening among the higher up brass. Something that, we're not connected to in any way, but we're just looking at it and logically trying to connect dots. The CFP is a big part of all of this, Tommy. And I think one reason you're seeing momentum out west with Pac-4 rumored to be meeting with the AAC, and we know San Diego State has tried to spearhead some of this too, is that I think there is some urgency and desire to try and keep the 5 and 7 model of the 12-team CFP. So the 12-team CFP right now, as it consists, is 5 highest ranked conference champions. Now, remember, that doesn't mean conference champions of the Power 5 are guaranteed in. For instance, in those years where Cincinnati's been really close, Cincinnati would get in as a guaranteed spot over, let's say, the ACC champion that year was ranked behind them. The ACC in that scenario, if they don't get an at-large, could get left out. So that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? 5 highest ranked conference champions and 7 at-larges. Well, Greg Sankey, who's been a proponent of the 12 team, is saying now, like, yeah, that probably isn't sustainable with what happened to the Pac-12, because our whole goal there was to make sure the whole country's represented. Well, now we have teams from the whole country in these other leagues, so we don't need to do that anymore. Let's just go to 12 highest ranked, which is what I think, by the way, has always been his plan, right? Because it means more SEC teams would get in there and get a bigger share. Remember this too. The reason why this matters is because you get paid if you get in, right? Like there's a bigger portion of the pot. So yeah, if I'm the SEC commissioner, I want as many SEC teams in there as I can possibly get. So he's rattling the sabers right now of, we don't really need to do that anymore. But here's the fallacy in that. And the danger has always been in this realignment. And I thought we were clear of it, and I still think we probably are, is that too many programs will be left out of what ends up determining the national champion. When everybody talked about this super league of like this semi-pro league, basically, of SEC Big Ten, I'm like, that is going to be a fatal mistake. Because if you don't have people that follow teams like in the Big 12 or the ACC, if they don't feel like they have a place at the table to determine a national champion, and by the way, the reality is they haven't for the most part, most of those schools, but there's still the idea that it could happen. That is critical to college football being successful, is the idea that Kansas State, with a perfect year essentially, could play for a national championship. That's it. That's pretty much the only thing that keeps everybody interested in the same product. If you take that away and you think people west or in the Midwest or that aren't fans of one of those schools are going to watch your product, you're crazy. Tommy, how much, like, it's already, because of the way it's designed, like, we already probably don't get up for the national championship the way we should. Could you imagine if the Big 12's not playing for that and it ends up being, I don't know, Michigan versus Alabama? How into that are you?
I mean, I'm into it, but but it's not like a must-see event for me.
Yeah.
Now, I like college football, but keep in mind, during that time, I mean, you're getting ready to start the NFL playoffs. I'm more locked into that than I am college football. And like, I'll be a part of the bowl season. I'll watch all the, not all the bowl games, but a lot of the bowl games. When you get around the holidays, around New Year's, the New Year's Six, and all of that, like, I'll watch all of that and be into it. But as soon as you get to the national championship game, and it's like that second Monday of January, usually, like, at that point, I'm locked into the NFL playoffs.
Yeah, I'm not.
And so
I'm not that into it. I don't watch bowl games unless they feature, really Kansas or Kansas State at this point. I don't watch them. I don't really care because they don't play for anything. Now, if it's part of a playoff, I'm in, right? Anything with a playoff, I'm in. And so here's the craziest part. If it's Michigan and Alabama in the format, the bad format I just laid out, I don't think people are that into it throughout the course of the year. Here's why it's important that everybody has a seat at the table, Tommy. It's probably going to be Michigan versus Alabama anyway, right? It's always been that way.
Yeah.
Right? That's the quiet part that nobody wants to say out loud is, what has Kansas State's chances of actually playing for a championship been anyway? Slim to none, right? But you're telling me there's a chance. And just that little bit makes that a more nationally appealing thing to watch. And so you have to maintain that if you want college football to be what it's always been. We can pretend like, and I say this, and I know it may make people angry. Like, we can pretend like, oh, it's just not going to be what it used to be, and I hate it because of all this NIL and all that stuff. Man, we're going to be right there every Saturday. If you were watching before, you're watching now. You can say it, whatever. You are. But if you took the ability to get in away, that changes things, and you're not. Because, I mean, it's already on the edge. Like, the NFL owns Sunday. We're already giving away one day of our weekend. To get us to give them both up, you're going to have to give us something. And I'm telling you, a playoff that just features SEC teams is not interesting to most of us. So you have to maintain that, even if it's fake, that idea that you could play your way through in these other leagues. You have to, or you've ruined everything. That was always the danger with this expansion stuff. Now, I think the Big 12 pivoted and eliminated that danger for the short term. But if you go to this 12 at-large model, you're getting into a really dangerous area. You'd probably be okay if you got all these mergers happening. But if you get all these mergers happening, you don't need to do that. You can at least keep 4 and 8, but you might be able to keep 5 and 8. Look, if the Mountain West AAC and Pac-4 merged outright, I think you could absolutely justify keeping the 5 highest ranked conference champions in. Because what does that end up being? Look back, in recent years, it would have been Cincinnati, UCF, or Houston a lot of the time. Boise State's been a part of that conversation and close. It's not a stretch that you would take one of those teams in, and they might get boat raced in the first round as the 12 seed play in Georgia. Okay. That still made their regular season far more interesting than it would have otherwise. So that's the danger here. And I think that's probably why there'll be pushback. I've said it before. I think that's why you're seeing Notre Dame try to get some merging and so that you can stop that from happening, because nobody outside of the Big Ten and the SEC, it doesn't benefit anybody if that happens.
I think that Greg Sankey would say the quiet part out loud that you said a couple of minutes ago. Like, it's already going to be Michigan and Alabama in the national championship, or Georgia and Ohio State in the national championship. It's already going to be, those teams. So why are we fooling ourselves by allowing other conferences in? He would say that, right? But the argument is what you just put out there, that even if there is a shred of a chance that a team from another conference can get into the playoff and make a run, then you've got fan bases. And you know what? Not even just fan bases of the team itself, but fan bases of the conference following it, right? Like, I'm not a TCU fan. I was locked into TCU in the national championship.
Absolutely.
I'm not a Kansas State fan, but I was locked into them in the Sugar Bowl. Like, and you get to that point in the year, and it's kind of like you tend to follow, at least I do, the conference that your team plays in. It's the same way during March Madness, right? Like, I'm always rooting for Big 12 teams in the national tournament, the NCAA tournament. I'm always going for Big 12 teams because that's the conference I'm most familiar with. And if you take away a seat at the table for these conferences and it becomes next to impossible for them to make it into a 12-team playoff, then at that point, what am I watching? Like, why am I watching? And you know what? I want to bring up another point here where you said that how there might be pushback and how this might not happen. I think you have to look at the networks, right? Like, ESPN and Fox signed a lucrative deal with the Big 12, right? Like, the Big 12, they were kind of the last conference to get a pretty solid media deal, a grant of rights deal done with two networks. How much value does that TV deal lose for the networks if the Big 12 all of a sudden doesn't have a seat at the table potentially for a national championship to be in the playoffs?
They'll have a seat. ESPN's not
like,
going to
there's a loss in value
because
I'm just
ESPN
saying, like,
has
that's where the pushback is going to come from, though. It's going to come from the networks, because if these conferences don't have that chance to get in, and the networks know, like, okay, well, then what's the value in people watching them then if they can't have a chance to win a championship or get into the playoffs? I think that's where the pushback is going to come from, will be those networks, to make sure that whatever conferences and whatever teams they are a part of, that those teams still have value.
I agree. I think there's going to be pushback from the networks when, I would imagine that when ESPN did the Big 12 deal that they did, that Sankey probably grumbled a little bit, like, we can't do our Super League now. And I don't know that that's what Sankey wants either. He may be able to read between the lines like we do. And saying that you wanted the footprint to be coast to coast and that's why we're going to 12, that's the right thing to say. But I think now he's saying, like, but we can reach that footprint without having to have these other leagues in and make it more lucrative for our leagues, which are the two big ones right now.
Yeah.
They're not going to have enough ammo if you can see your mark. Look, if we're sitting here looking at this and understanding it, your Mark understands this stuff. Like, he knows what this all means and what's on the line. I would imagine the ACC does too, but maybe not. The problem with the ACC right now and what their issue is, and this is why Notre Dame is so publicly, I think, pushing for this, any sort of merger, is because you have lame ducks in the ACC. You have schools in the ACC that feel like they could get to the other side there. And so they're resisting change on their own end. But we'll say it again, like, where is Florida State going if they're able to get out? It's not going to be the SEC, I don't think. I don't think they have enough value for the SEC. Big Ten, possibly. But man, they'd have value in a merged Big 12 ACC if you can get the network that is involved in both, by the way, to get back to the table and throw that ACC deal out the window. And ESPN has to think about this from two fronts. ESPN has the CFP. So, like, getting to the end game, yes, ESPN might lose out in the short term of having that nice deal with the ACC. But it also has the advantage of having a deal with the Big 12. I'm sure you could get Fox to play ball. I don't think that part would be very difficult because Fox is a part of the Big 12 deal too. Fox, you can have what you already had. We're doing this. You want in? Like, you could probably figure that out. But they've also got that CFP. And if ESPN's smart, it's got to understand the highest value of the CFP too. It's not to have a Big Ten SEC. And that was always rumored, is that ESPN was a driver in trying to get this Super League. You got to be smarter than that. You got to understand what we're talking about. It is important to make that as lucrative as you can, to have everybody feel like they're involved. That just enhances your brand. So if they know that, then they're the ones that can get to the table. And if they're willing to say, all right, ACC, you merge with the Big 12 instead of you guys and the Big, because they're both right around 31 million, right? We'll give you all 40. Because if you're ESPN, doesn't that save you money?
Yeah.
Hell, even if they went
Yeah.
to 45 or 50, long term, that's going to save you money.
And then you don't have potential scheduling conflicts, between the two conferences as you're trying to schedule games on the network. I mean, I know it's easy, but you eliminate that, right? Like that becomes a non-issue at that point. And then you're basically killing two birds with one stone. You're increasing the value from a combined merged Big 12 and ACC, but then you're also saving money overall in the long term because you're only basically paying out one media rights deal as opposed to two at the same time concurrently. So, I mean, I do think that there is value there for ESPN. And we know, and it's been made public over the last month or two about the network's role in realignment thus far, right? About how, Fox came to the table with a last minute push for Oregon and Washington to leave the Pac-12 and go to the Big 10. We know their role, right? Like that's a huge part of, the driving force behind realignment. So if ESPN wanted to, the Big 12 and the ACC would probably merge.
I think so. You get egos involved, and hopefully the ACC's learned its lesson on that. People get mad at the networks driving this, by the way. Why? Why do people get mad at the networks for driving this? I don't understand how that angers people. You got to understand at some point down the road, players are getting paid. Okay. It's going to happen. If you don't have network involvement and these large sums of money going to the universities, you're not going to be able to pay these players. It's going to happen. They can fight it all they want. They lose every time they go to court, and they always will, because it doesn't make sense and it's borderline illegal that the players don't get paid now. That's going to happen at some point. You need the networks involved to drive up the revenue to be able to do that. So I don't understand why people are so angry that the networks drive this. By the way, don't you like watching your teams play? Like, you need the networks involved in all this. You need the ability to watch your teams play, unless you want to go like the Division II route where you can watch student broadcast on a stream. Like, come on now. So let's just be real about all of it, right? It's what's coming down the road that everybody's trying to prepare for when all of this gets talked about. Merging's always been the best option. Always. From the beginning, the Pac-12 should have merged with the Big 12 when Texas and Oklahoma left. They should have. We wouldn't be doing any of this if they'd have done that. I'm not sure UCLA and USC would have left had that happened, but they didn't. If you're the ACC, you can't just, you have to look at that stuff and understand what's going to happen to you if you just let yourself, and I don't care if it's now, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, if you just let yourself get poached by the SEC, the Big 10, and if that happens, then the Big 12, because that's what will happen, you're dead.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Let's not have history repeat itself, right? And we talked about this last week. There is a blueprint on how the ACC should go about this. The blueprint is what Brett Yormark and the Big 12 has done. It's not what George Kliavkoff and the Pac-12 have done. And so I think that that's going to be incredibly important. And I know that all along, the ACC has set back and said, we're pretty secure in our media deal. We feel pretty good about it. It goes a long time. And we feel confident that when, 2031, when that rolls around, we're going to be solid. But you don't have a crystal ball. You can't predict that. And now knowing, or at least speculating, that the American is having conversations with the Pac-12 and potentially the Mountain West, there goes the group of schools that you could potentially, if you're the ACC, look at poaching, look at bringing in. Like that kind of goes away at that point if this other scenario pans out. So you've got to be aggressive, and like, honest to God, like if I were either Brett Yormark or the ACC commissioner, like I don't care who makes the first phone call, somebody make the phone call and say, hey, look, with all of this going on with the American and the Pac-12, and knowing that there's going to be conversations about the CFP and how the entrants are determined and all of that, like, let's come together. Let's make something happen right now.
It will take, well, it'll take more than just egos going to the side for that to happen. It'll take the networks to be on board. It'll take ESPN. ESPN's got to be willing to tear up the ACC deal for anything that we're talking about to happen. And I don't know that they're going to be willing to do that. And if they're not, the Big 12 is probably going to wait, and everyone will just wait. And you'll have disgruntled ACC members as they try and patch it together. And we'll see what happens with Florida State, if anything, today. But if you can't get ESPN to tear up the ACC deal, it doesn't matter what the ACC wants to do. They're stuck. And that's another part of it. But in the meantime, these rumors of what's happening west doesn't really matter. Other than you've seen the report now that we told you about, again, from M3, HVR, whatever it is, that ESPN might be willing to walk away from the AAC deal that currently stands. And, of course, the AAC is not going to let that happen unless they know they have a deal in place, like with Apple or whatever, where, look, if you're the AAC and Apple's going to give you $15 million, now you're talking about, like, everybody wants a place on linear television. But when the money's that much different, it's like, okay, we can probably justify that. Like, we could probably justify that. And you can still go back to, like, CBS Sports Network. There are some other linear options that you could maybe try to get into, because the Mountain West has some CBS connections. You could probably partner that up with maybe CBS. Maybe Fox has a light interest in that. Maybe NBC has a light interest in that. I don't know. But ESPN is fine, I think, getting out of some deals so that it can focus on the CFP. That's what makes me wonder, like, why wouldn't ESPN then in that scenario be willing to get out of this ACC deal? Because if you're ESPN and you get you get like the rights and majority of a merged Big 12 and ACC, you win. That's a net win for you. And just watch what happens with basketball, as we've talked about forever and ever and ever. 869-1240. That's the latest on realignment. Hope we didn't muddy the waters even further for you. And again, this does affect Wichita State, so we'll keep an eye on all that for you as well. Let's give away our Thomas Rhett tickets here, Jad. We'll do our third caller, Thomas Rhett, country music star, coming to Intrust Bank Arena this Friday. I'll be there. Wife's getting me out there, so maybe we'll see you out there at that concert. Third caller to the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. Jad will get us a winner. Tommy and I will be back. We'll talk about these old dogs in the NFL running back rooms. Just got a little stronger, and it affects one of Wichita's own. We'll talk about that next on Sports Daily. Welcome back in, everybody. Congratulations to Mark with a C for winning tickets to Thomas Rhett. Maybe I'll see you there, Mark. Good job winning those. What does that leave us with? We've got another pair to give away tomorrow. That'll be our final pair there. We'll still give away some Wind Surge tickets before we leave today. And then we've got maybe one more pair of the Blue Beetle tickets to give away tomorrow, and we can always give away some HTO here. I know someone there, so we'll be in good shape.
You got a connection. You got a hookup.
What's that? Okay, all right. So you'll have two more opportunities to win that over the next 2 days. What'd you say, Tommy?
I said you've got a hookup at HTO. You got a connection there. Yeah,
I do. We can get that taken care of. Appreciate Jad for organizing all of this chaos on our giveaways. Almost as chaotic as conference realignment. But let's switch to the NFL here, Tommy. So we've been waiting sort of yesterday. I don't think it's all that surprising. I think the Patriots need another body in the room, so the Zeke Elliott signing makes some sense. And then I think it's probably a case, we'll just assume here, that when Dalvin Cook saw the deal Zeke took, the Jets deal looked pretty good, and so then he took the Jets deal. The big fallout for us is what does it do to Breece Hall, of course, with that Dalvin Cook signed with the Jets. As Breece Hall's ready to come off the PUP list today and begin practicing. As much as I don't want to see anybody take carries away from Breece Hall, we can optimistically look at this a couple of ways. One, it preserves him and helps him get back to full strength to know that Dalvin Cook's there. Dalvin Cook is a very short-term thing there. Breece Hall is a very long-term thing there. So it probably ultimately won't impact a whole lot. It does protect him a little bit. And if you're the Jets, Tommy, let's be honest. You're uneasy with that room, not knowing how Breece Hall, how quickly he bounces back from his injury. So for the Jets, it's always made sense to bring Dalvin Cook in there just as an insurance plan, if nothing else. And of course, it'll probably be more than that.
Yeah, we're talking about Breece Hall coming off of an ACL, and that's never an easy comeback, right? And it usually takes a long time. And so I understand the Jets and their desire, especially considering that they are all in this season with Aaron Rodgers, and the other people that they brought in. They want to go, they want to win the championship right now. I mean, within the next year or two. And so I understand them wanting to go out and get somebody like Dalvin Cook as, maybe even as small as an insurance policy, but even as somebody that can be successful for them running the football this season. And I don't know if we're going to end up seeing a timeshare between the two of them. It may end up being that. I don't know, though. I know that Cook was down statistically in his final year in Minnesota compared to the years prior, but I think he's still got a lot left in his tank. And so I don't know if he'll be able to bounce back, kind of be revitalized with a new look team and all of that, playing with Aaron Rodgers or not. But I don't have any doubt in my mind that the Jets still think incredibly highly of Breece Hall and feel like he is their guy long term. I just think that they know that Breece Hall is coming back from, an ACL, which is always tough to come back from, and their window of opportunity is right now.
Well, sure it is. And again, this can help Breece Hall too. Like this can be a good thing for Breece Hall that he is given a little more time to get back to full strength. It also enhances his chances of long-term success, which we know for running backs right now is a big question, right? Like, does this keep Breece Hall fresh enough that he's the most effective right as he comes up on his contract? I think that, can benefit him too. So it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Zeke Elliott goes to the Patriots. I get it. I mean, they get into the preseason. It's kind of Ramondre Stevenson, and that's it. Like their backups, who Pierre Strong. Like I for a team that is going to utilize its running backs, always does, always has, always will. I don't think they had enough there, and so I don't know what role Zeke will play. I think probably short yardage. But Ramondre Stevenson caught a ton of balls and can do that. I don't know how much it's going to impact Stevenson. Maybe it takes away a few carries, but also does it allow him to add a little more James White to his game, right? Like, can they utilize him as a pass catcher when Zeke's out there? I don't know, but it made total sense for the Patriots. Do either of these moves for you shake anything up in what you see in the AFC East as a whole? It does put Miami behind at that position. They need a back too, and now it's down to like Leonard Fournette, I think. So I don't know that and they drafted that A-Chain dude. So maybe they think they've got enough there, and they probably fine. I don't think either of these moves move the needle either direction. Dalvin Cook was pretty effective last year. I think he ran for 4.5 yards a carry. So he's still got a little bit of juice. So maybe it helps the Jets just a little bit. But I don't think like the Patriots signing Zeke Elliott elevate them over the Dolphins for me.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I would still have the Patriots as more than likely the bottom team in that division. That signing does help them though. And, especially knowing that Mac Jones didn't do a lot last season. And there was that quarterback controversy between him and Bailey Zappi, and maybe Mac Jones was on the outs with Bill Belichick. I think that does give an opportunity for, this is the way it's been in New England for a while. The running game is important for Bill Belichick. And so I think if you've got Zeke Elliott, and maybe he's a red zone guy, maybe he's a third down guy, maybe he's a goal line guy. I don't think he's going to be the bell cow. I don't think that's really his game anymore. for New England, but I do think that he's got opportunities to get in the end zone quite a bit. And really, like, knowing that you've got a quarterback in Mac Jones that is probably not going to be incredibly effective, that does help the run game a little bit. But in my mind, they're still behind Miami. I think that the Jets only strengthened, in my mind, their position, that I think that they should be the favorites to win that division over Buffalo. You were talking about who runs the ball on the teams in which
over Buffalo.
Who does Buffalo have to run the football right now? James Cook? I mean, Dalvin's brother. Like, that's basically what they have to run the football. And I know that that's not really their game. I know they had.
That's better than what they had last year.
Well, true, but they like to sling it around. I know with Josh Allen and Steph Diggs and Gabe Davis and whoever else they have at wide receiver. I know the run game is not really their strength, and it really hasn't been. But man, like, I don't know, like, right now, if you asked me who I think is going to win that division, I don't know how I can pick against the Jets.
I could pick. I'll tell you how, and I'm high on the Jets. You know that. Have you looked at their schedule? They open the year Buffalo at Dallas, New England, Chiefs at Denver, Philadelphia. That's their first 6 games.
That's pretty brutal.
It's pretty brutal. And then it's at Giants, Chargers, at Raiders, at Bills, Dolphins, Falcons, Texans, at Dolphins, Commanders, at Browns, at Patriots. They don't have a lot of schedule relief in there. So they're going to have to at least split with Buffalo. But Tommy, like, there's a chance that they start 2-4. And so at that point, and here's why I don't like picking them over Buffalo. I still think they've got a chance to win the Super Bowl. Their chance to win the division, though, it's going to have to start fast. And with Rodgers there and all the newness, like, starting fast seems like a dangerous proposition. So can they, I think they're going to finish strong. Like, I think they're going to be really good by the end of the year. But can they maintain enough early? Because how many games do you think Buffalo is going to lose this year? 4, maybe?
Yeah, 4 or 5.
So if the Jets started 2-4, right? You know what I mean? Like, that's why that division is tough for me to have them win.
If they come out of the gates slow, and that opening 6 games, that's brutal for them. 2-4, if that's what they do in their first 6 games, at that point, like, yeah, they're probably not winning the division. I think 3-3, they do still have a chance to do that. 4-2 is probably your best bet in your first 6 games, knowing that schedule to get started with. I don't know. I mean, to me, if Aaron Rodgers, and that's really been the key in all of this, if Aaron Rodgers can repeat the MVP type seasons that he had a couple of years ago in Green Bay, that's going to be tough to do. But, they've really done, that organization has done, in my mind, a good job on trying to mitigate the newness from Aaron Rodgers, like bringing in people that he's comfortable with, getting things acclimated early. There's already been, I don't know if you saw this, I think it was on Hard Knocks. There's footage of him being frustrated at his receivers. That happens. That's happened every single year.
At that offensive line. That's going to be the question.
Every single year that Aaron Rodgers has been in the National Football League, he's been frustrated with his wide receivers. And I looked at that and I'm like, well, I guess he's feeling at home now. I mean, because this is basically that's always happened. So I don't know. I think that they do, while that schedule is brutal out of the gate, I'm not counting out the possibility that they do come out strong if they can go 4-2 in their first 6 games. That's a win, I think, to get through the first 6 games that way. And then they're in the driver's seat for the division.
Let's go even more hyperbolic with them. I think if they're going to win that division, they have to beat Buffalo in the opener at home. I think you have to win that game at home against Buffalo. And I think the chances of that are not good. Like, I don't know. What's the opening line on that? Let me give me 2 seconds and I'll look. That's going to be, if that game is close and again, like, I'm in on the Jets as a Super Bowl contender. I just don't think it's happening. I don't think it's happening early in the year. And I think it's going to have to be as a wild card. How do I get out of the preseason? Get me out of this preseason schedule. Okay. So that line on that game, and it's Monday Night Football. The Jets are getting 1.5 at home. I'm going to be all over the Bills in that game.
Really?
That line holds. Yes. Like Rodgers Rodgers has got to get cohesion with the receivers. That's his MO. Like he's got to, and he did that late in the year last year, right, with Christian Watson, but he's got to connect with those guys. That's going to take a little time. And their offensive line doesn't look good right now. And that's been the storyline, right? Can they fix that part of it? Their chances to beat Buffalo. And here's the other piece of it. Why are we overlooking Buffalo? Like, why is everybody down on Buffalo? Diggs is there. He's fine. Little drama with Diggs, but there's always a little drama with Diggs. They added a really talented weapon to the offense in Dalton Kincaid. I think there are people, a lot of smart football people that think James Cook with a full role is an upgrade in the backfield, and basically everything else is the same, and Von Miller's not hurt. Like, Buffalo's getting way overlooked. I'm not sure that I don't
think they're getting overlooked. In my mind, I'm just not willing to give Buffalo the benefit of the doubt in that division this season like I have the last, 3 or 4 years, because there's finally significant competition in that division.
Yeah, I agree with
that. They've been able to roll over every other team in that division for the last 2 or 3 seasons. And now I think that there is legitimate competition with the Jets. I think that there is, to a degree, legitimate competition with the Dolphins. The Dolphins are not a complete team, but there's better competition with them than there used to be. And really the Patriots, they're the worst team in the division, but they're not awful either. They're not terrible. So I think that that division as a whole has gotten tougher and is even tougher this season with the addition of Aaron Rodgers with the Jets.
But Tommy, if
than
it's
it was
tougher
a year
on
ago.
Buffalo, it's tougher on the Jets too. You know what I mean? Like Miami getting better in New England, the Jets have to play them twice too. So it's not only Buffalo's burden to bear that the division got better. I think it's the Jets' burden as well.
I just think that it was a foregone conclusion over the last 2 or 3 years that Buffalo's going to win the division. And I don't think that's the case anymore.
No.
So I don't think
either.
I'm not overlooking them. I'm not saying that they're not talented, they're not worthy, they can't win the division. No, they absolutely can. I'm not overlooking them. It's not a foregone conclusion, like a slam dunk in my mind that Buffalo is going to roll over that division again.
I would tell you right now, I would predict the Jets as a wild card team that makes noise. I don't think Aaron Rodgers needs to be playing at home because he'll most likely he's a cold weather guy anyway. So going on the road I like the Jets to make a little noise and be a legitimate Super Bowl contender, but it won't be as a division winner because I just don't think they're going to get off to a hot enough start to be able to do that. But maybe, look, I'm not going to put it past them to come out and just, be great from the beginning. I just think at this point that feels as unlikely is not even the right word because it could happen. 50-50 proposition at best that they come out of the gates hot. I would say it that way. We'll see. Again, Hard Knocks is there for a reason. They're the most interesting team early in the season. There is no question.
And you know what? If we know how brutal their schedule is out of the gate, they know how brutal their schedule is out of the gate. And so that's got to be priority number one. Like, how do we manage our way through the first 6 games? Because I don't want to go so far that you went when you said the division will be decided in week 1. I think that's a little bit extreme.
I don't know that I really believe that either, but it's going to be
the division. I think it can be decided within the first 6 games. And so the Jets organization has to know that. How do they get through that brutal stretch to start the season where you come out of it and you're still in the division hunt?
Let's take when they play the games, and just throw that to the side and just look at a collection of opponents collectively. If I told you, could the Jets win the division without beating Buffalo in New York, what would you say to that?
As long as they beat them in Buffalo. I think if you can split with Buffalo, I think you're okay.
But isn't that critical of winning your home game in there? I know it's not.
Well, sure.
Obviously.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It just happens to be in the first week. That's the thing. They happen to open with that game. Nice job. Maybe the best ESPN Monday Night Football game we've had in the series there. Okay. We'll take a quick break. Let's do our Win Surge tickets, Jad. We'll give away 2, 4 vouchers, whatever you need. You can pick the game of your choice. Is that regular season and the opportunities to get out there is winding down. Jad will do that to our first caller on the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. We'll come back. Last full segment of Sports Daily coming right after this.
All right, let's do this thing. Go!
Sports Daily is on KFH.
Welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily with you here on KFH. Tommy, real quick check-in on the Royals last night. That was a fun one. If you're a Royals fan, you had the fastest inside the park home run since, I believe it was 2017. I saw on social media by Bobby Witt Jr. last night, who continues to be maybe the best hitter in baseball over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And then you also had another fantastic pitching performance from the Royals and their young Brady Singer. Youngish. Is he even young anymore? But 7 1/3, 2 runs allowed, just 2 hits allowed, 8 strikeouts. We've seen flashes from him before, but he's flashing a lot the last few times out. If Brady Singer's a piece, we know Bobby Witt Jr. is at this point, but if Brady Singer's a piece, he's hitting that age where pitchers sort of hit a stride at 27. He's been really good. Basically, I say really good. He's been good his last 4 times out. Maybe you could say 5 times out, but here we go with Singer. And he's, since July 16th, he's been reliable.
How about Bobby Witt Jr. over his last 15 games? He's got an average of 453. He's 29 for 64, 6 home runs and 21 RBIs in his last 15 games. I mean, catching on fire right now. And I don't think that it's a flash in the pan, right? Like, I think that this is what we've waited for with Bobby Witt Jr. We've waited for him to come into his own. He has. And it doesn't show any signs of slowing down at this point. To your point on Brady Singer, yeah, I mean, if he can be a key part of that rotation moving forward and provide them some reliability, that's really the most important thing, I think, with the rotation is pitchers that can be reliable. They don't have to be aces all the time, but at least they're not going to go out for the most part and throw up a bloated number, right? Or have an ERA over 5 or 6. Like, you want them to be fairly reliable each time they go through the rotation. If Brady Singer can continue to find his way to be that pitcher, then that's great for the Royals. The only downside of the game last night, the bullpen was awful, right? Like, the bullpen blew the game for him. Brady Singer had a no-hitter going into the 7th. And all of a sudden the bullpen gives up 4 runs and, the Royals win. They ultimately win the game on a walk-off bunt, which is good. But I mean, yeah, you want to see that bullpen better, but of course they traded away Barlow and Chapman. They traded away their best pieces. So that kind of is to be expected at this point, but it certainly is more exciting than it was a few weeks ago. And I think it gives the fan base something more to watch.
For sure. And you're just looking for long-term pieces now at this point, right? And because it's going to take a special free agency year for the Royals to be any sort of contender for anything next year. So it's like, okay, what are the pieces here? And Bobby Witt Jr. is a superstar, right? There's no other way to put it. Brady Singer could be a solid 2 to 3. The problem with Brady Singer is going to be, and you watch, he's finally going to get his groove and his consistency, and then he'll be a free agent and they'll lose him, right? That's destined to happen. But it's good to see it. It gives you pieces to look forward to next year. I don't think this is a 50-win team again next year. They can't be that bad in free agency. They've got to do something, and I think that they ultimately will. Congratulations to Ken, who's going to see the Surge, the Win Surge here, courtesy of us here at KFH and Sports Daily. Speaking of the Royals, you'll hear him right here on KFH play Seattle again tonight. Coverage begins at 7 o'clock. Tom and I'll come back. We'll tell you what else is on tap on the network today when Sports Daily wraps up after this. All right, that's it, everybody. Appreciate you joining us here. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor, Jad Chambers with another Sports Daily in the books. Following us, Jim Rome, who's back from vacation until Bob and Jeff take over from 2 to 4. CBS Sports Radio programming until 7 o'clock. The Royals and Mariners get things going in Kansas City. Bobby Witt Jr. continuing his tear. Hopefully he can keep doing that and give us something to talk about with the Royals. It's been fun the last couple of weeks. Wins aside, they've been an exciting team to watch. Nonetheless, that's it. Tomorrow we should have Kevin Saul on the program. Great timing with all this conference realignment stuff. We'll pick his brain on that. I'm not sure how much he can talk about it, but we'll try it. 869-1240 is the number. Till then, for Tommy and Jad, I'm Jacob. See you tomorrow.
Sports, later news, and